What is up, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Dense Pixels podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Brad, joined by my co-host, Carrie.
What's up?
You know, my day job is trying to kill me today, trying to cause me a great amount of stress. But shockingly, the news in the video game industry mostly good this week. It's a nice change of pace from what we've been enduring for the last several weeks when it comes to the game industry. So I'm very happy to get into that stuff. Nothing new really game-wise for us this week. Carrie's still chugging along on Persona.
I'm right at the end. I'm in the back half of December, so I really don't have that much left to go. It's great if you like Persona 5 and want to get into the earlier Persona games. Play Persona 3 Reload. It's extremely good.
And for me, life is Balatro, and Balatro is life. That is like the only game that I can play right now because it's amazing. I did start playing SnowRunner because I've always heard really good things about those games, and SnowRunner was on sale because the new one, Expeditions, just came out. So I haven't played enough of it to really formulate an opinion yet, so I'll probably talk about that in a couple of weeks. But I did start driving some big trucks across lots of mud. And so that's been more fun than I thought it might be, considering the game I was premised. So let's get into the news then. Capcom, one of the the company that's been on a fucking heater for like the last 7 years, is bucking the trends that we're seeing around the game industry right now. They announced that they are going to be increasing their starting salaries for their employees in Japan by more than 25%, and they're going to be giving existing employees, I believe, a 5% increase and a bonus to help.
Yeah, it looks like current employees, including those who join in the 2024 fiscal year, everyone's getting a one-time special payment, which is basically a bonus. Capcom had already increased employees' average base salaries by 30% in April 2022. New bonus system, all sorts of good stuff.
Yeah,
nice developments. Now, of course, this is only applying to their Japanese employees. Who's to say what's going on at Capcom USA? It's one of my dude I followed for a long time on Twitter, who's been one of the localization folks, actually just got laid off after 8 or 9 years at the company. So they've definitely experienced their own layoffs in the USA branch of Capcom, which kind of sucks. Definitely not to the degree of, other major stories we've covered recently. But yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a reflection of societal values and how companies are generally structured in the United States versus Japan. Just given that Japanese companies have, over the last, let's say, year and a half, have generally been raising employee base salaries and doing everything they can to attract stronger talent. And American companies have just been doing layoff after layoff after layoff to appease shareholders. So
now this does have to come with the caveat that, of course, game developer salaries in Japan are by and large considerably lower than you'll find in the U.S. and other countries. So basically, they're currently their new graduate hire rate before this change was 235,000 yen per month, which translates to about $1,560 U.S. And that's being increased to 300,000 yen, which is about $2,000 U.S. So again, even if you're coming out of college working for Capcom, you're only making about $24,000 a year. I would presume that probably goes a little further in Japan than it does in the U.S. So everything's relative. But again, it's a great sign to see when companies are stepping up and paying their people more money in the wake of all we ever seem to see is of layoffs and studio closures and things like that. And good on and you mentioned societal values. Japan corporate culture is one that is very much more of a success sharing culture. Japanese CEOs definitely make more than rank and file employees, but not to the exorbitant extremes
No,
that American CEOs make compared to their rank and file
not
workers.
even close.
Right.
And that like so many things have to happen before a company is even legally allowed to consider doing layoffs
Mm-hmm.
at the level that American companies are able to just snap their fingers and do it.
Yep.
Um, yeah, there's a lot stronger worker protections in Japan.
Yep.
Um,
So
but hey, good for Capcom.
look,
You love to see it.
we're gonna take wins where we can get them. You know what else is a big win? Microsoft has voluntarily recognized uh, a QA worker union in Activision of about 600 employees, which is a huge deal. It makes this pretty much the biggest video game union in the United States, and that's pretty
So they
cool.
have unionized with the Communications Workers of America, and this covers central QA workers at Activision across their Austin, Texas, Eden Prairie, Minnesota, and El Segundo, California locations.
Yep.
So the union itself is called Activision Quality Assurance United CWA, and it is the largest group of unionized video game workers in the US. So hell yeah, good for Microsoft for voluntarily recognizing them, that they didn't have to have their arms twisted about it. QA is certainly one of the most important and one of the most undervalued positions within the game industry at large. We will talk more about the importance of QA later on in the news, I think.
Yes, we will.
So yeah, I mean, you can't have a good game without good quality assurance and without strong testing. And it's a shame that basically for decades, QA testers have really not been paid what they've been worth. And they are oftentimes the people who really have to do a lot of crunch towards the end of a game's development cycle. So yeah, I mean, if you want games to continue to be good, you need to pay the QA people what they're worth.
Yep. I gotta tell you, I don't see this snowball doing anything but picking up size and speed
Mm-hmm.
as this year and next year roll along. Again, especially in the wake of all the layoffs that we're seeing, I'm pretty sure that unionization is looking awful good to a lot of folks, even not just on the QA side, but also on the development side as well. Because again, you know, we talked about those Microsoft layoffs that happened when they acquired Activision Blizzard. You know who didn't have to worry about layoffs was the unionized employees, because there are laws in place and contracts negotiated that require a certain amount of advance notice given before you lay off unionized folks.
Yeah, I mean, it's overall, unions lead to, generally speaking, better benefits and better job security. The article linked in the show notes here notes that Sega of America's union workers were able to save 18 jobs, as well as negotiate better severance for those who still ended up being laid off. And ZeniMax's QA union members were spared from the massive 1,900 person layoff in January. So, yeah.
Yep. More unions. It is incredible to me how in this country, in the United States, the conservative, really like neoliberal, time of the late 70s, 80s, the Reagan era, really just like broke the backs of the unions in this country, and made it really successful for corporations. And just because they couldn't restrain themselves from just being the greediest fucks alive, they're just gonna campaign. People are just gonna get right back into those union efforts, just because again, it's not enough to make some money for the shareholders. You have to make all the money for the shareholders, and they forgot about the people that got them there along the way. You know what? You love to see it. That's what I'm going to say about the about the growth of unionization across many industries. And this is someone who works in management for his day job. So like I'm, I love unions. I think they're fantastic. More
Yeah.
unions, please, especially in the game industry. Of course, the Embracer Group, one of the embattled publishers, one of the embattled corporations out there who are embattled because of their own doing, because they decided to spend like crazy during the pandemic, and now they
Mm-hmm.
realize that money doesn't come back in at the same rate that it goes out in the video
Astounding.
games industry. I know, it's shocking. It's amazing.
Turns out growth is actually not infinite, and
So
that you cannot just spend your way to success.
as a quick aside, like, it's just amazing that some of these CEOs don't fucking trip over their own feet every time they walk out of bed in the morning, because they just don't understand basic business principles. But that's fine. As they are fire sailing as many of their properties as they can, one of the biggest ones is now independent of the Embracer Group, and that would be Saber Interactive. Embracer has confirmed that they have sold Saber Interactive for $247 million, and two other groups within the Embracer Group, 4A Games and Zen Studios, were included in that sale after the fact, which takes the deal up to about $500 million. Saber encompasses a lot of different developers. A couple notable ones besides Saber themselves. You have Nimble Giant, who worked on Star Trek Infinite, 3D Realms, which long storied franchise, both for good and for ill.
Donk chonkum.
Yeah. New World Interactive, Slipgate Ironworks, who worked on Slipgate, which was a popular game a couple years ago, had its moment in the sun. Madhead Games, Fractured Bite, and many others. Embracer is keeping some of the studios in the mix, including Tripwire, who makes the Chivalry games, Tuxedo Labs, who made Teardown, Aspire, who is working on the Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection, more on them in a little bit here, and a few others. But again, I'm pretty sure that the Saber Interactive folks are more than happy to be free of this sinking ship that is the Embracer Group, who again have did it to themselves. This isn't the last we're going to see. There's been a rumor out there for months, I feel like at this point, that Gearbox is going to get divested out of Embracer at some point here, which again, good for Gearbox. They're a publisher that's a little bit better than what the Embracer Group can provide right now. But just a fantastic boomeranging of fate, I guess, for Lars Wingeford's one of the biggest child men in gaming, apparently.
What kind of cracks me up about the whole Embracer thing is that, like, it feels like the embodiment of that one fucking old drill tweet where it's like food $200, rent $800, utilities $150, video game studio acquisition $2.5 billion. Someone who is good at the economy, please help me budget this. My family is dying. It's like, if that just like isn't the situation, then I don't know what is. But it feels like that is the situation where it's like they spent so much on.
They literally bought. Again, like this is where they're fucking up, because like when you're buying companies that aren't even trying to sell, like when you're just buying companies for the sake of buying companies, like that's when you're going a little too far. That's when you're going a little too far. Just have pretty things in your trophy cabinet that you can show off to other.
Sometimes I buy a thing just for the sake of getting the fucking dopamine, right? I'm a millennial. I'm part of the terrible little treat culture that we all live in now. But the difference is that my little treat is like a boba drink and not a $1.5 billion video game company acquisition just for shits and giggles. And that's what Embracer Group is doing.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Look, I really hope that every developer, both in and out of Embracer Group, get to see continued success. I would hate to see Saber and some of their other folks get out only to have to find their way to close again. And again, Saber, it's not like Saber's independent. They were sold to another private investor group, but at least the company they were sold to is controlled by the former Saber Interactive co-founder. So that's probably a good place for them to land, I would presume. Let's do one more story before we go to break. So, TikTok's been in the news lately, and we'll talk about it more on Look Forward this week.
For a lot of very bizarre reasons.
Yeah, for a lot of reasons. Basically, the U.S. government is trying to lay down an ultimatum to TikTok, saying to parent company ByteDance, either sell to a non-Chinese owned company or we're going to ban TikTok in the United States. So we'll get into the the real meat and potatoes that Jay and I will look forward tomorrow when we record that.
Definitely doesn't have anything to do with what's going on in the Middle
No,
East right now.
there is
Definitely nothing to do with that.
Nope. There is, however, a video game tie-in to this story. Because our good friend, you thought we heard the last of him, silly
Fucking
you.
Bob's back.
Bobby Kotick apparently wants to buy TikTok, according to reports. It is from the Wall Street Journal, so I would imagine that there's probably some legitimacy behind that. But yeah, basically, Kotick has recently approached the CEO of ByteDance to let him know that he is interested to buy it. And if you think that Bobby can afford TikTok on his own, Bobby's very rich. I don't think Bobby could afford TikTok, an app that's probably going to be worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Like if you thought the Twitter price was insane.
Here's the thing. He apparently suggested this idea at a dinner earlier this week to a group of potential partners, including to Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, which of course itself is under fire for many very legitimate reasons.
Yes.
Unlike what's going on with TikTok. But it's just like, we could just get a group of the world's biggest douchebags all owning TikTok, which I'm sure the United States government would be all for, because if there's anything the US government loves, it's a rich white shithead. But I feel like it would just immediately, like, if you have Bobby Kotick and the OpenAI guy owning TikTok, then one, you're immediately going to have AI, like generative AI bullshit trained on what you're uploading if it isn't already doing that. And two, Bobby's gonna put microtransactions in it somehow.
It's it leads to a very important question, right? So like right now, ByteDance is a company that's backed by the Chinese Communist Party. Is it a good thing that a lot of our algorithms and stuff like that could potentially be accessed by the Chinese government? Probably not. It's not a great thing. I don't think it's particularly worse than what we already deal with American-owned social media companies in this day and age. But that's a discussion for a different podcast. But Carrie, what do you think would actually be worse? The Chinese government having access to your algorithmic data, or Bobby Kotick?
My gut says Bobby Kotick. Like, I know that that's probably not true, but my gut says Bobby Kotick. I have a far more storied history of disliking Bobby Kotick than I do have disliking the Chinese government. Like, I don't know what's going on over in China. I'm sure it's nothing good. Truthfully, I have had far too much going on in my own personal life to be able to spare the mental capacity to worry about whatever the fuck is happening with the Chinese government right now. But look, it wouldn't be good. I don't think it's going to happen.
I don't think so either.
I don't actually think it's going to happen, but I don't think it would be good. Now, that being said, the one upside is that like 1 billion more people would understand how much of a douchebag Bobby Kotick is. It wouldn't just be limited. It wouldn't just be limited to people who have had to put up with, Activision and all that shit, right? So like, that would be a bit of a silver lining, right? Is that on one hand, he would own TikTok. On the other hand, everyone would like instantly understand how much that dude sucks. So, as someone who I don't use TikTok. I am not personally particularly invested in what the fuck's going on with TikTok. I have purposefully avoided TikTok because the last thing I need is another social media platform to have to worry about. It's not for me. It's never been for me. But I don't know. I think it'd be kind of funny to see Bobby Kotick run the thing into the ground.
Look, I think that you can blame me and Jay for doing this. We had a mini viral moment on TikTok a couple weeks ago, and all of a sudden now the U.S. is like, "Now we got to shut them down.
Get these boys out of here."
Thugs the News is getting too much influence. with the general population.
Jesus
We got to
Christ.
get him out of here. So, you know what? I'll tell you what. Bobby Kotick sucks, but I'd rather him than Elon Musk if I had to choose between dismal, terrible CEOs of corporations to run mine. At least he wouldn't burn TikTok to the ground. I don't think Bobby Kotick would.
Hmm.
So, but you're right. I do think that you'd immediately see like a premium, some sort of premium option pop up on TikTok. Really,
100%. It'd
give
be
us
the first
$10
thing
a
you
month.
do.
Yeah.
How do I make more money off of this?
Correct. How can I monetize this for my own gain? So,
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna take.
How are we going to turn TikTok into an annualized series?
We're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll be right back with more news. Oh, right. So, continuing along the news beat, SAG-AFTRA is talking possible strike against video game companies due to the breakdown in negotiations with those companies regarding the use of artificial intelligence as it pertains to voice acting. As you guys will remember, the SAG-AFTRA body voted to strike in September of last year. They did not actually strike against the game companies. They did negotiate a new agreement with games industries, and the agreement that was proposed was poo-pooed by a good portion of the SAG-AFTRA membership. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens here because, again, companies will get away with whatever you let them get away with.
Mm-hmm.
And they will always make decisions in the interest of cutting down overhead costs. And you better believe that if game companies can find a legitimate use for AI to do voice acting, that is a hell of a lot cheaper than actually paying actual voice actors to do actual voice acting in your video games.
Yeah, it sucks. You should simply hire people to do art because that's what voice acting is. It's an art. I mean, side note, like, I think it's so fucking stupid that, like, in what is supposed to be, like, the future, right? Like, we're a quarter of the way through the new millennium, and we have AI that's being used to, like, do the fun, creative things rather than the bullshit, like, tedious things. Like, if AI was being used well to do, like, bullshit tedious things, then more people would have more time and energy to do fun artistic work.
Mm-hmm.
But instead they're trying to get rid of the people doing the fun artistic work by replacing them with AI, and I think that's so fucking stupid and backwards.
I remember I think it was the I could be wrong. I could be misquoting my economists. But I think it was the Keynesian thought back in the early 1900s that the problem with developing labor in the world wasn't that workers won't have enough time to do things. It's like they'll have too little work to do. Like they'll be able basically like Keynes predicted that like automation and things of that nature would provide a new renaissance for people because to your point, like all of the robotics and automation and stuff like that would be doing the work that people didn't want to do, and people would have more time to just kick back and relax and paint pictures and look at clouds or whatever the fuck people do when they don't have to work for 40 to 60 hours per week,
Right.
doing a job that they care only enough to put food on their table about. And again, like the thing that you'll see where AI will really impact the gaming industry. You might still have you might hire voice actors for your like prominent roles in your games, but like your NPCs, like your background characters and stuff like that, if companies can just spend a couple tens of thousands of dollars on an AI version to do those voices and not actually have to pay more voice actors to provide those background
what's
dialogue.
fucked up about it is that most voice actors are horribly underpaid to begin with. Especially the folks just doing, what would be qualified as additional voices on the credit, right? But it's not going to stop there, right? It's not just going to be your, background characters in a Bethesda side quest that are getting the AI voices. No. They want to train folks on like main leading people voices, and it's going to result in people losing jobs, and it's fucked.
And a more poor end product as well. I mean,
That too,
you
because
undervalue. Yeah.
ultimately you can tell an AI bot to say something, but acting is a skill.
Hmm.
Acting cannot just be skimmed and regurgitated. It can't. Um like you can get something that maybe has the vocal quality and timbre of a David Hayter or a Jennifer Hale, but you're not going to get the performance. And that's what really makes the characters, right? It's not just the voice, it's the performance as well. So yeah, the end product's going to suffer. And absolutely, I think SAG-AFTRA should strike against this because AI sucks, and I can't wait to see more of these lawsuits go through and things like ChatGPT and all these open AI bullshit products get shut down. I
Yep.
think they suck, and if you are in favor of them, I will fucking PvP you in the street. I don't give a shit.
Remember we talked a couple of years ago about the because there's a brief trailer shown, I believe, during a PlayStation State of Play for a modernized remake of Knights of the Old Republic
Uh-huh.
that was being helmed by Aspire Studios,
Mm-hmm.
and people were
God, that was
skeptical.
announced a while
It
ago.
was a couple years ago, and people were skeptical. Aspire had never done to that point much aside from usually ports of older games.
God, that was 2021 already.
Yeah, yeah. And eventually, the project went through enough trouble that it was taken away from Aspire. I think Saber Interactive properly has it now, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't know who's going to publish it because I don't know if PlayStation still has that deal in place to publish it via their first party folks. And if you thought Aspire got a raw deal, the events of the past week or so may suggest that maybe it was actually good that Aspire not working on the Knights of the Old Republic remake. Aspire did release the Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection, so basically a re-release, not even a modernization, just a
No,
like
it's just a
yeah,
port. And
just a
that's the
port.
thing about Aspire. Just quick aside is that I didn't really have high hopes. And you can go back and you can listen to older episodes. I didn't have high hopes for Aspire doing the KOTOR remake because they have always just been a port company.
Yes,
They have always just been the people being like, okay, well, we're going to put The Sims on Mac OS instead of Windows. We're going to put Medal of Honor on Mac. We're going to put uh they've put a lot of things on Mac, basically, is what I'm seeing.
yeah,
We're gonna put Fighting Fantasy, the Warlock of Firetop Mountain. We're gonna port that to Nintendo DS. They've mostly done Mac and more recently Switch ports.
hmm
But this is a studio that literally for the first 15 years of its existence was literally just taking console games and porting them to Mac and or Linux, and that's really it. And basically starting in 2018 they started doing more Switch ports. So more
hmm
recently, really within the last 6 years, they've done a lot of Switch ports. So they've put like Civ 6 on Switch. They put some other Star Wars stuff, right? They put Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast, and Jedi Academy on, and like the original KOTOR on Switch. So they had already done all of these Star Wars ports, right?
hmm
They did KOTOR, they did Force Unleashed, they did KOTOR 2, and then they got to Battlefront Classic Collection and just completely whiffed,
yeah.
apparently.
So yeah, they remastered, or not remastered. They
No.
ported the original, the PS2 Battlefront games, which have a special place in the heart of gamers of a certain age.
Hmm.
And it has not gone well. It is reportedly the eighth worst rated game on Steam at the moment. It has 19% positive reviews, which for a Steam game, even a bad Steam game, is pretty bad. Reportedly, when the game launched, they only had 3 servers on PC to accommodate the community
20
of
1,000
Yeah.
players on PC on launch night, and 192 were able to access some of the game's modes.
Yes, and aside from that, there's been bugs, stuttering, hit detection has been poor, and Aspire has made a statement even saying, "Hey, we've experienced critical errors with our network infrastructure, high ping, matchmaking errors, crashes, servers not showing up, and they've been working to address these stability issues." Here's the question that I have to ask: is there even like do most game companies in this day and age even have a QC check before they let a game get out the door, or is it just fucking ship it and we'll worry about we'll worry about fixing it, like we know we're gonna catch shit, but we'll worry about fixing it later?
I mean, I guess it depends on the company.
Yeah.
I clearly Aspire did not have a quality control check.
Well, and
Like,
the thing about this,
did they not think that there was going to be a massive interest in folks our age who would want to go back and play, like, ostensibly one of the most impactful and influential online shooters of the PlayStation
right?
2 era?
And you can all, like, if you're printing a physical disc, you can always make the argument because there's production schedules you have to maintain too, and you have to certify the game, and it has to go gold a number of weeks in advance.
This doesn't have
Yeah, this is only available on digital marketplaces. Like, you could have even up to a week before the game came out been like, you know what, we're not going to be ready in time. It's not ready to stand up and be ready for public consumption. We got to push this back a little while here. Would it have dampened the confidence in the eventual release of the game among consumers? Yeah, but I don't think that this method is better, especially when on Steam, like, you can get into a game, realize it's fucking broken, and immediately get a refund within an hour or so. Like, I don't understand. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul, essentially, in this case, and I just don't get what companies' thought process is, other than, hey, let's get it out, people will buy it anyway, and then we'll just deal with it later on. This isn't a Helldiver situation where they legitimately were caught flat-footed by the amount of success that they had. So, like, their servers were not ready to handle that load. Like, that's a nice problem to have. This is like, there's no way you could have known that this game wasn't a buggy mess before you sent it out the door. No excuse for it. No excuse. And again, this is why people are cynical about this industry in this day and age, because of shit like this, and studios like Aspire just, doing the bare minimum to get this stuff out. A couple this week in layoffs before we move on to the post office. Shorter show this week because there really just wasn't a lot of news. Deviation Games, which Sony made a whole big fucking stink about. I remember when they created the studio back in 2020, had a whole big, 5-10 minute segment during a state of play, like, talking about, hey, Deviation Games is great, this is very exciting, we're awesome, it's gonna be great. Yeah, they're closed. Studio shut down. Never even published the game.
Nope. Never even got anything out.
Yep. So
kind of sucks in a very special kind of way, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
absolutely.
It's people who are losing their jobs and don't even have anything to point to and be like, well, at least I got to do this, right?
Right. And again, we saw the same thing with that Battlefield spin-off studio that EA created, that lasted 2 years and done. So it's really, really fucking unfortunate. The other one is a bit of a non-traditional pick here, but it's still gaming related and it still ties to a video game company. I was not aware that Warner Brothers owned Rooster Teeth, one of the seminal early games media companies, like direct to like skit video, that sort of thing. Of course, famous for Red vs. Blue, famous for Ruby, among a lot of other things they did. I was not a Rooster Teeth guy, but I am very aware of their.
I wasn't either.
Right, but I'm aware of their prominence in the industry.
I would say, I watched some of, like, the early Red versus Blue stuff, but I was in high school when that stuff was first coming out and was, sort of first popular. Ruby never hit for me. It hit for a lot of my friends, and ultimately Ruby is responsible for helping a lot of my friends in the video game music community sort of have careers, because a lot of them got their sort of starts doing music for Ruby, as far as, doing music professionally. So I can at least recognize the impact and the positive influence that Ruby had on people who I consider close friends and colleagues. But Ruby was just never really my
Yeah.
speed. But I gotta at least have a decent amount of respect for Rooster Teeth, um, for being around for more than 2 decades and
Right.
for basically turning a goofy Halo parody into a multimedia company that I think employed like 150 people or something like that, and basically all those folks are going to be laid off, which of course sucks.
Hmm.
But of course, Rooster Teeth not without its own share of controversies, a lot of alleged workplace misconduct. They notably had employed Vic Mignonia, who um, that dude sucks. If you're unfamiliar, the long story short is Vic Mignonia is a sex pest and finally got called out for being a sex pest a few years ago, and there was a whole lawsuit about it. Now he doesn't really do voice acting anymore because he sucks. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people who will look back very fondly on
Hmm.
the various Rooster Teeth properties. And it looks like at least they will be sort of like finishing out what they started. The final season of Red versus Blue is basically going to be finished. And yeah, basically after they really took off with Ruby, they were acquired by a production company, Full Screen, and then they were acquired by like AT&T, and then merged Warner Media with Discovery, and basically all sorts of stuff. That Rooster Teeth got bounced around a lot within the
Hmm.
last 5 or 6 years, basically, and the entire time their revenue just kept dropping and dropping and dropping. So
Yep.
ultimately, this is just kind of what happens. It's a shame, but in a lot of ways I feel like Rooster Teeth kind of ran its course.
Well,
So
and that's unfortunately what kind of, especially with a lot of media companies like this, like when you do get acquired by, especially larger corporations, that influence tends to start to trickle its way
mhm.
into the product. A little bit. It's why generally independently owned media companies still kind of maintain their identities a little bit more. Like Kind of Funny has now been around for 9 years, I think, at this point,
Mhm.
and they're still very much, like their personality still glues because they don't have a corporate owner who they have to answer to, or is controlling the purse strings and things like that. So it's notable just because, again, Rooster Teeth in terms of, like, they're kind of a pioneer in many ways
Mhm.
of even what we're doing right now. Like, they were kind of one of the first people to really hop on the scene. So it's notable that they're gone, and just another shitty thing to tack onto Warner Brothers is their headstone, as it were. So we're going to take another quick break, and then we will be right back with the Dense Pixels post office to answer your questions. So every week we answer questions from our Discord, densepixels.com/fans, in a little segment we call the Dense Pixels Post Office. Like from Phil Wander, who said, Power Wash Simulator Addict here. If you were tasked with pressure cleaning something for, say, $100 million, what famous place would you clean?
I would clean Mar-a-Lago, and only if Donald Trump was home so that I could spray Donald Trump in the face with a power washer.
That's not bad. So it's hard, right? Because, like, I don't want to do a ton of work for $100 million, but, like, it has to be a notable place. So
Mhm.
it has to be something of some note. For 100 million, and if I had the powers of Power Wash Simulator, which lets me make all kinds of weird jumps and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
Maybe like the White House, like just cleaning the exterior of the White House would be okay. I don't know why I'm. Oh no, actually, this is stupid. I'm thinking. Wait, I'm not taking an easy route. The Washington Monument would be the easiest thing to clean
Oh
for
yeah,
$100
I mean,
million.
because it's
It's just an obelisk.
yeah,
It's
it
super
it
easy.
would be very easy to do. No, I'm going with the like, who do I get to wound, hopefully mortally, with a power washer? So I'm going Mar-a-Lago.
That would be pretty cool. I would dig it.
Yeah, look, if I can make that place look an ounce less tacky, then I feel like I've done a good benefit to society.
That reminds me, I still got to pick up that 40K expansion they put out for Power Wash Simulator.
I
at
haven't
some
played
point.
it at all. I feel like I would probably enjoy it.
It's a fun chill game. It's a fun chill game, and they have a free Final Fantasy VII levels as well.
Great.
that you can see. You can power wash like Tifa's bar and and
watch
the Shinra Midgar
building.
model. Yeah. So, Casa says, Carrie, I'm not familiar with the Kalos region, but wondering how they plan to include a diverse range of Pokemon types and sizes in an urban environment for Legends ZA. Do you think we're going to be chasing P-Doves and Garbodors into traffic, or something like they envision for Pokemon Go, where we'll find bugs and grass types in parks, and then fire and electric types in industrial districts?
I mean, I think it's going to be both, right? Ultimately, like, you do a huge city that is presumably divided into like sort of obvious little sub districts and whatnot, and you know, you have like a waterfront and a big park and all this other stuff. I don't think it's going to be particularly difficult to be able to include a solidly diverse range of different types in an urban environment. I'm looking forward to playing it regardless. I liked X and Y quite a bit. So I'm also really looking forward to the amount of Pokemon Zaza jokes I'm going to be seeing online for the next few years because of this game. So yeah. I'm not too worried about it, you know. I mean, I also, you know, you look at like the other Pokemon media, right? You look at the anime for inspiration on that, and probably also, you know, Detective Pikachu as well, as far as like how they were able to incorporate different Pokemon types and different sizes in a way that like felt really natural to look at in these other medias. So I'm sure they'll be pulling a lot from the other Pokemon media on that front as well.
Amir asks, is there a video game whose story was so bad that when you beat it, ruined your experience with the game?
I've said this before, but it's going to be Bravely Default.
I knew it would be Bravely Default for you. I wonder if you can guess mine.
How can it not be Bravely Default? Because Bravely Default had so many good things going for it. It had a great job system, fun gameplay, great battle system, incredible music, and then they fucked it up with the story and the world building. Like, I ultimately never 100% finished Bravely Default because the story and the way that it was done made me so fucking mad that I just wasn't gonna finish it. I don't know if I can guess yours.
Mine ties back to one of the earliest episodes of this podcast, because it was a game that came out around then, and we all played it, and we had some thoughts about it.
So like 12 years ago?
Yeah. For me, that game is BioShock Infinite. One of the worst.
That's a good one.
One of the worst endings to a game, just because, just amazing in its sheer laziness for building up this incredible like plot, and then just kind of just fucking underselling it with just the tropiest of fucking explanations as to how that game came to be what it was.
Yeah, I think BioShock Infinite, it's a really interesting game to look back on more than 10 years now, because I feel like when it came out, everyone was so fucking hype on it because the first two BioShocks were received so well. And by the first two, I mean mostly the first one. But Infinite was just like built up to this like huge thing. And then I think people like, I feel like the hype and the initial response to that game was so overwhelmingly positive because people had like built up in their head what it was going to be, and it sort of hit on a lot of that. And it feels like more and more there are retrospective opinions on that game coming out where everyone's like, this game kind of sucks. Like, this game's story especially kind of sucks.
Yeah. Well, it's because, and again, the reason that Infinite was so hyped up is because it was the return of Irrational, because obviously they didn't make the second game, and they farmed it out. 2K farmed it out to a different studio.
Right, and like Ken Levine came back to do it, and it was like, all right, Mr. System Shock 2 and the original BioShock guy, right? Yeah, It's
I think the thing that fucked them, first of all, the ending of the original BioShock was a little bit lackluster compared to the twist in that game, which actually happens
mhm,
at like the 2/3 mark. That's number
yeah.
one. And then number two is, I think, because like they had such a prominent and famous like story moment that is universally beloved in the first game, that they felt the pressure to like kind of outdo that. And I feel like that they just kind of got out over their skis a little bit and sort of had to almost like, instead of like ending up at a conclusion and figuring out how you get there, it's like they built and built, and when they were at the story, and then they didn't know what to do at the end of it, essentially. Kind of in a
Mhm.
similar way to like how Mass Effect 3 was, except I didn't like fucking hate the ending of Mass Effect 3. I just thought it was a little sloppy.
Yeah.
And they did a better job, retconning that a little bit. I think they did a little bit of massaging with the DLC in Infinite. I could be wrong because I never played the DLC for Bioshock Infinite, but yeah, just I remember when I played that game, like I really enjoyed the game itself, and then when I got to the ending and it was just kind of hand waved away with multiple realities and temporal rifts and stuff like that. I'm just like, this is so fucking tropey and it's garbage. Like, what a fucking letdown for this game.
Yeah.
C. Kent asked, this may have been asked before, but is there a PS1 era game you would like to be remastered or remade for current generation consoles?
PS1 era.
I mean, I would
Hmm.
love, like, I know we got Twin Snakes back on the GameCube, and that's a kind of a whole different thing. I would love to see like a proper original Metal Gear Solid remaster in the style
Okay.
of like MGS4. So
I mean, I don't have a super strong attachment to the PlayStation 1 because I didn't have one. So most of my experience with the PS1 was going over my friends' houses and playing like demo discs that were received from a magazine or a Pizza Hut or
I love those demo discs. It's how I
yeah.
discovered Metal
There
Gear, for
was one
fuck's
really
sake.
good one. Like
Yeah.
I feel like the one I played the most had a demo. It was like the first level of the original Metal Gear Solid, and then
Mm-hmm.
also Jet Moto.
Mm-hmm.
Jet Moto is a game I would love to be brought back. I love like, can we just bring back like Jet Moto and Wave Race 64? That would be killer. Just like jet ski racing video games, please. With good soundtracks. Um Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver,
Mm-hmm.
maybe. That's
I don't think
that's
I actually don't think Legacy of Kain holds up as well as people
it probably doesn't. It's just
nostalgically
like it's just a game that like I sticks in my brain as like one that I enjoyed playing at my friends' houses. Because otherwise, the other PS1 games that I really played a lot of with my friends have already been remade because those were Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon. Um, so I'm already covered
it
as far
is
as that.
it is remarkable how many, like, really, like almost all of the notable PS1 franchises have been
Hmm.
properly remade at this
Yeah,
point.
that's basically it. Um, yeah, I mean, FF8 and or 9, I guess. If
Didn't 8 get that HD remaster
yeah, I
edition?
mean, it got like a port, right?
Right.
An HD port. So it's like if they're gonna do like a quick upres, they should probably do 9 next.
And I think 9, honestly, it doesn't need a lot of work. I think that game works, like it has a timeless look to it because they decided to go with the older school character designs in
Yeah.
that game. So I think that works pretty well. Um, yeah, I think
Yep.
that I think we're right on it, because again, a lot of those games that you probably think you wish could be remade, like Siphon Filter, like, actually didn't probably hold up as well as you think it did. So
No.
Film Wanderer asks again, in honor of X-Men 97's release on March 20th, what is an X-Men game that does not get enough recognition? It's a real blind spot for me because I don't think I know of too many X-Men games in
Um,
general.
like the one that I always think about is the old arcade one with like the 6-player
Mm-hmm.
cabinet, the double screen cabinet. Um, but I feel like that one's like properly remembered. Like
Yeah, and
as far
the
as
Genesis one is probably the other most famous one that is also properly admired, I guess
yeah,
you could say. Yeah, that's the thing.
Um,
And I think that as far as the other prominent good games that the X Men have been involved in have been more Marvel encompassing games in general, kind of
yeah,
like Ultimate Alliance and stuff like that. So
yeah, that's sort of it. I mean, I guess it's like I sort of think back on. I guess there were like a decent amount of like X-Men fighters, right? Like
mhm.
Children of the Atom, and I mean, what was the other one for Super Nintendo? Mutant Apocalypse. That one's kind of fun.
Mhm.
So you're sort of like more side-scrolly action platformer, beat 'em up.
When Mike is back after his after he takes a couple weeks off, we might have to ask him this question because he'd probably be a better source of this than Carrie or I.
Here's what I'll say. An X-Men game that doesn't get enough recognition is probably X-Men Mind Games, and that's because it was canceled. Um, Scheduled for the Sega 32X. But like it had its like in progress ROM like dumped, and like the whole soundtrack was finished. It was done by Jesper Kid, who notably did a lot of other sort of similar style games of the era.
Mhm.
Um, like what the hell did he do? Freedom Fighters, um, Red Zone, The Adventures of Batman and Robin was a big one for Jesper Kid. Still composing.
Yeah, let's say, didn't he do the Assassin's Creed soundtrack on the original?
He's been Assassin's Creed more recently. Has worked on Warhammer 40K Darktide, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Borderlands 3, Dune Spice Wars. He was involved with. He's also scored some films and television series as well. But yeah, Jesper Kidd did the soundtrack for X-Men Mind Games, and it's weird and very mid 90s Sega sounding stuff, but you can find the whole soundtrack on YouTube. There's a rip of it. So yeah, if you want an X-Men game that doesn't get enough recognition, Mind Games would be it because they never put it out. So
Let me ask you this, and I don't mean to derail, but we didn't put in the docket. So Nobuo Uematsu apparently
mhm.
said in an interview recently that he thinks that film style scores in video games are boring, and he kind of wishes more games would, not try to emulate these like grand epic scores that films tend to have.
Yeah. Um I can sort of see what he's getting at. It's interesting. It really depends on the style of game that you're playing. I think there are certain games that can be sort of elevated by having that sort of sweeping orchestral like film score kind of, I guess, John Williams sounding shit, right? But ultimately, like when it comes to video game music and when it comes to film music as well, is the music elevating what else is going on the screen?
Mm-hmm.
The very similar sort of things apply to both. The difference is that with a video game, you have someone who's being actively involved rather than just a passive observer. So, I think of what really stands out to me as far as memorable pieces of video game music. It's like you have boss themes that are maybe in like taking advantage of a minor key or strange time signatures, because what the goal is to keep the player sort of feeling, you know, uncomfortable, right? Where it's like this is a big moment, it's a big fight, and so you want to sort of be on your, back against the wall a little bit, and so the music should reflect that versus, a grand sort of, exploration, big open area
Mm-hmm.
like your Hyrule Field kind of music. It should feel appropriately grand, but it shouldn't make you feel tense.
Right.
You're still sort of going on this big grand adventure. Whereas, like, a film score, you still need to sort of match emotionally appropriately what's happening on the screen. Um, I sort of wonder if things are being a little bit lost in translation with Uematsu, and
Right.
ultimately, Nobuo Uematsu hasn't really been doing a lot of composing
Yeah.
as of recently. So much of what he did was really back in like the late 80s, early 90s. He's only sort of done occasional main themes recently. Like his most recent thing was he did the main theme for FF7 Rebirth, and a lot of his work for the original FF7 was rearranged and reorchestrated, though he wasn't really involved in those rearrangements or re-recordings. He hasn't really been doing much full game arranging and composing in really, let's say, probably 10 years or so. It's like he did The Last Story, he did Fantasy Life. He's done, some few other things. He did Terra Battle. But as far as, full on game composition, he just hasn't been doing much of that since really, let's call it the mid-aughts. So it's tough. I mean, every game is different. Some games, I think, benefit from having the orchestral film-y kind of inspired score, but ultimately, like, the best composers, both in games and in film and in television and across all sort of like multimedia, they are simply writing to match the scene. And if they're successful at that, then they've done their job well. To me it feels like sort of a
old man yells at a cloud.
Kind of an old man yells at cloud kind of thing.
Yeah, but I say if Uematsu thinks that, sit him down in front of like a From Software boss and tell me that you shouldn't have like epic orchestral scores in the background.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think he more of the sort of interview that was given, he said directors and producers are satisfied with movie soundtrack like music in games, and then basically said that if the Hollywood style carries on, then game music cannot develop further. And it's like, well, what do you really mean by that? I think Uematsu comes from a place where he was developing music for extremely limited sound.
Right, he had to do more. He had to do more with less. And
he had to do so much more with so much less. And so I wonder if he's basically thinking more along the lines of like, well, I was able to create all of these memorable soundtracks using basically 4 channels worth of music.
Tony Stark built this in a cave.
And
scraps.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. He also, in the same interview though, he did sort of take a stand against AI, saying that, the role of an outstanding score is to convey empathy between composer and listener. You want to reach down inside yourself to find aspects unique to you and then expressing them, which is not something that can or should be substituted for AI. Yeah, his last full soundtrack was for a little game Fantasian in 2021. Yeah. So, I don't know. Very much old man yells at cloud kind of
situation. Yep.
Situation. So
Daniel asks one of the seminal and yet easiest to answer questions of our time. Which is worse, being too hot or being too cold?
Too cold.
What? Oh, really? You think so?
I don't like being too cold.
You're wrong. Being too hot is absolutely worse because you can always layer up if you're too cold. You can only remove so many articles of clothing.
Look, I am someone, I get cold very easy. My extremities have a tendency to get very cold very quickly. I don't know. I can deal with being sweaty. I can't. I hate being cold so much. Big reason why I love living in California. Is
but I would say you're out of this now.
Few and far between.
You're out of this now. There's no worse feeling in the world. Being outside on like a 98-degree day, fucking 80% humidity. Like you just feel like you're walking through fucking soup. Yeah,
I don't miss
the
soup
worst.
No.
It's the worst.
Yeah, I don't know. I fucking hate being cold. It's like I would say it's like if I am like outside and it's hot and sticky and whatnot. Like, I'm not having a good time, but I'm not cranky about it. I get really cranky very quickly.
Cold sucks when it's windy. Like if you're combining
Oh,
heavy
dude, yeah,
wind
it's the
with
worst.
cold, that's pretty rough. Hot humid weather feels oppressive.
Yeah,
Like
that's
you just
fair.
feel like you're being oppressed when you're out in that by the earth.
That's fair.
And so that's why I'm always going to pick being too hot. Way worse.
And like you would think I might say being too hot is worse. Like I did marching band for years.
Yeah.
So like I've been outside in like just the shorts and a sports bra and like ended up basically getting like heat exhaustion, heat sickness. So it's just I don't know.
uh,
I would still rather be too
we
hot.
will have to agree to disagree. Look, it's
That's
okay.
fair.
It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to be wrong as long as you embrace your wrongness. Mad Coco G says, "I saw the end of Evangelion in the theater during the weekend, and given the cash cow it is, did they ever say why we never got any of the random games localized?"
So if I were to guess, one, like, yes, Ava, pretty popular and certainly big in Japan right when it released. I seem to recall it taking a little bit to come over to the United States. Like, the original run of the anime was 1995, 1996, and
Mhm.
I don't think I even really heard about it until like the early 2000s. Um, and you've got all these games that came out in Japan while it was sort of at its peak of popularity in the first place in Japan. So you've got games for the Sega Saturn, for the original PlayStation. Yeah, a lot of Sega Saturn games, some Windows games, an N64 game, few others, and I just think it probably didn't come over to the United States just because the popularity of Ava in the United States wasn't that big until like 10 years after these games came out.
Yeah,
So it's
and
like
localization costs
Ava,
money too. Like you have to remember, like
yeah,
you're literally having to write. It's not just translating what comes up on the screen. Like English localizers almost had to write like entirely new scripts that
right.
were
You have
based
to,
around the context of games that were originating
yeah,
in Japan, just because the language doesn't translate one to one.
one to one, yeah.
Yeah,
Um, so, and I think there's a few things. One, like Ava's always been really big in Japan. It hasn't always been really big worldwide. I am sort of the opinion that Ava's not super mainstream popular. It's just that the fucking weebs who like Ava won't fucking shut up about it. So I think people tend to hear a lot about Ava, but the fan base is not necessarily as big as you think it is. Um, yeah, look, I just by the time Ava like actually sort of started to pop off, so to speak, in the United States, and of course Ava was not something that like even really ran on like Adult Swim, I don't think, for a while.
hmm
But yeah, it's I have a lot of thoughts about Ava as a franchise. I'll just say that I just chances are they looked and they saw that like the audience probably wasn't there
yeah.
when these games were coming out.
You also have to remember the context of the times. Like it's very easy to kind of look back and romanticize a lot of Japanese games from the 16-bit era, like especially role playing games.
Mhm.
Here's a fun fact though that I forgot was true. Chrono Trigger, when it released in the U.S. on SNES, only sold 300,000 copies, if you can
Yeah.
believe that, in the United States. It's hard to believe now because of how prominent that game is and how many people played it, but it was not like an uber. I mean that and that was very successful. Like 300,000 copies sold in the
Yeah.
U.S. For a Japanese RPG
For
at
a
that time.
niche
Yeah,
JRPG, yeah, that was
was
big.
incredibly successful. So that's probably wise because they probably would have done it. They would have sold like 50,000 copies, and is that worth it at that point? I don't know.
No, probably not.
So
I mean, I think of the other sort of like anime related video games that were coming out in the 90s, and the one that stands out to me as the sort of odd release has always been Ranma 1/2 Hard Battle, because it's like I liked Ranma, but I didn't get into Ranma until like 2002, and this game was released in the United States in 1993. And then I think about the fact that like Hard Battle's a fighting game. There's not that much text to translate. and I just looked it up, and like the English translation was all done by Viz Media, which owned the rights to Ranma anyway, and probably had the same people that was translating the anime and the manga just translate the video game stuff. So it was just an easy sort of one-to-one situation with that. But yeah, I just, while Eva is certainly a, massively influential anime and manga franchise, I just don't think it's had like the market in the United States to do again like a 1996 N64 game. Like there wasn't an audience.
Case in point, I mean, we're like Japanese companies are just now figuring out that there's an American audience. Like there was a news story this week that reportedly Atlas has finally decided that when Persona 6 comes out, it's going to simultaneously release on PlayStation and Xbox, because they just now in 2024 realize, it's probably a good idea to have our game on more consoles. Yeah, like we'll be able to get more owners.
Here's the other thing, right? Is that like it wasn't until Persona 5 happened that there was even like a mainstream like, oh, the Persona games are good kind of like mainstream acceptance of that fact. So yeah, that Atlas will now do Persona 6 is presumably a worldwide simultaneous launch in all languages and across all systems. Yeah, that makes sense, but like it took 30 years to get there from the original Persona coming out. And like the original Persona, Revelations Persona, was released in English back in the day, but that was like such a very, very niche thing.
A niche of a niche. So
yeah.
Finally, Cam asks, what is your favorite big business that has ever happened in Boston? Of course, a reference to the AEW debut of Mercedes Moné, formerly known as Sasha Banks, in WWE. You know what? I'll keep my answer wrestling themed. Boston, of course, the city in which Stone Cold Steve Austin won his first world championship at WrestleMania 14. So that would be my favorite bit of big business that happened in Boston. Carrie, do you have a non-wrestling themed answer for Cam's question?
Boston?
PAX East out in Boston.
I haven't been to PAX East.
Never been to PAX? Okay, neither have I.
No, I would like to. No, I've never been. New Kids on the Block. They're from Boston.
I forgot that they were Boston based. Of course, they've got a Wahlberg. So.
Yeah, they almost had two. Marky Mark was actually originally going to be a member of New Kids on the Block, and they were like, "Yo, this dude can't fucking sing."
But he can.
They
rap.
replaced him. They replaced him with Joey McIntyre. I'll say New Kids. I have no other great love for Boston as a city.
There you go. Thank you guys very much for submitting your questions, which you can do at our Discord group, densepixels.com/fans. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, either on a podcast app of some sort or on YouTube, where you can catch the show in video format every single week. And of course, don't forget to sign up for premium content from TNP Studios by going to densepixels.com/premium, just $5 a month or $50 for the full year of premium shows, of course, highlighted by the Look Forward Political Podcast, the full episodes of which you get on premium every single week. Thank you all very much for watching and listening, and we'll see you all the next time.
See ya.
You're watching the Dense Pixels YouTube channel. Click the subscribe button while you're here, and make sure you check out our weekly podcast where we discuss the latest gaming news and our impressions on what games we've been playing.